With 8 or 9 DUI lawyers in our law firm, you can imagine that we have some pretty interesting conversations. Talk about the hundreds of cases that we have, trials we win, trials we lose. There's a lot to this. And so we thought that we would provide you a little bit of behind the scenes access into some of those conversations. Now, I want to say that nobody wants a drunk driver on the road, myself included, right? That's obvious. And we certainly don't condone drunk driving. But just because somebody is arrested for it does not mean that they're guilty of it, right? That is the way our system is set up, that it must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And the thing that makes that so important and upholds this justice system is that that person is entitled to a defense, and that's what we do. So I want to provide you a little bit of that access, and I hope you enjoy it. So Kelly, you had an interesting case a while back. It was a DUI, and you had a hearing in front of the judge. That hearing went well, but it's really what happened afterwards, which is most interesting, right? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about the facts of the case.
Sure. So my client was at like a club drinking with some of his buddies, and he parked in the back. And when he came out, he drove through the alley in order to get to the street to go home. And he probably drove for about 10 feet. And he was like surrounded, kind of backed in on both sides by police officers. They had activated their emergency lights and sirens. He couldn't go anywhere anyways. They surrounded his car like on all sides. And he was alone in his car as well. They drew their guns and told him to get out of the car, told him to shut off the car, brought him to the back of the car, and immediately put him in handcuffs. I think that they thought something else nefarious was going on, like his vehicle was stolen or he had a weapon or something like that. They took him to the police department. He had no idea what was going on. And then all of a sudden, like an hour later, they tell him he's being arrested for a DUI. And he had no idea why he was being arrested for a DUI. They did ask him to perform field sobriety tests at the station, which he did, and I do not recommend that.
Nope.
But they asked him to blow. He refused to blow, which was good. And then the police provide everyone that's charged with a DUI a piece of paper that informs them that their license is going to be suspended. And on that piece of paper, they have to say what their reasonable grounds are for believing that that person was driving under the influence of alcohol. And on that piece of paper, they didn't even mention an odor of alcohol, right, which is very unusual. They never even asked him if he had been drinking that night. Obviously, they had been surveilling him coming out of the club. But they really didn't have anything, to go on. He did pretty well in the field sobriety test at the station. Plus it was like, an hour plus after. They had no bad driving. He literally drove for like 10 feet before they pulled him over. So I put on a hearing to argue that the officer had no reasonable grounds to believe he was driving under the influence of alcohol in order to get his driving privileges back so that his license wouldn't get suspended, and I won that. And then we immediately set the case for trial, and when I set the case for trial, when we appeared in court in person for the trial, the state came up to us and told us that they were dismissing the case. It was a rare occasion where state's attorney reviewed the evidence and did the right thing because they knew that they were not going to meet their burden.
Right. So the headline there is you had a hearing regarding his driver's license. It became at least apparent to the judge that the officers overstepped, and that's why this guy got his license back. But then sort of the extra step was made by the state's attorney to just dismiss the criminal charge altogether.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they would prefer to just, quote unquote, put the trial on instead of dismissing the case, for the bad press. They don't want it to be in the press that they're dismissing all these cases, but sometimes they might not want it to be in the press that the police didn't do the right thing. So in this case, they just dismissed it. But with the hearing regarding the suspension of the driving privileges, it's only up until the time of the arrest. So at the time that they arrested him, they had absolutely no evidence, right? He drove for about 10 feet. There's no odor of alcohol. They never even asked him if he had been drinking. They weren't in the club. There's no surveillance from inside of the club, and they put him in handcuffs. The field sobriety test couldn't even come in to evidence at that hearing. So
because in a case or hearing like this, the police officers have to be able to articulate what they knew or even what they believed at the time, right? There's a difference between stopping somebody and then going and looking for guns and what happened in the club and is the car stolen and all these things. They can't just go justify those things after the fact. They have to be able to articulate what they believe at the moment of stopping that person.
Right. Yeah. What are their reasonable grounds for believing that the person is driving under the influence of alcohol on a public highway at the time that they put them under arrest for that reason?
Yep. Kelly, you recently won a DUI case by using the officer's own body-worn camera against him. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that the kind of invention of the squad video and the body-worn cameras has been super helpful to the defense bar. It really shows an objective view of what occurs on the scene. It shows an objective view of what occurs back at the station. We have so many clients tell us that they weren't read, the warning to motorists that tells them what will happen if they blow or don't blow. We hear some people tell us that they were never offered, say a Spanish-speaking officer to assist them, or if say that they were treated poorly. I think it prevents officers from treating people poorly because they know that they're being recorded at all times. I've seen bad evidence pickup from body-worn cameras, so I've gotten evidence thrown out from that. I saw an officer pick up bullets with his own glove and then turn the bullets into the glove. Well, now those bullets are contaminated. You can't send those to the lab. The other thing is that if the police departments destroy the videos, because a lot of police departments have a policy where they'll only keep the videos on hand for say 60 or 90 days, then we can get anything that might have been shown on those videos thrown out because you can't do that. So they have been super helpful. One way that it's been helpful to one of our DUI clients recently is that we basically caught an officer in a bold-faced lie, and the village prosecutor did the right thing because I think that she was appalled at her officer lying as well. But what happened is every time there's a DUI, a police officer fills out a police report, and they also fill out an alcohol influence report, and then they fill out a piece of paper that gets handed to the client that informs them that their license has been suspended as a result of the DUI. And on that piece of paper, they have to indicate what their reasonable grounds were for believing that the client was driving under the influence of alcohol. And on all three of those, the officer indicated that he smelled a strong odor of alcohol emanating from our client's breath. Then I get the discovery and I review the body-worn camera. They go and talk to the client. They don't say anything to him about smelling an odor of alcohol. And you and I have watched enough DUI videos to know that if they smell an odor of alcohol, they're going to say it to him. And they're going to ask him, what have you been drinking tonight? Where are you coming from? If the client's like, oh, no, I haven't been drinking, they're going to be like, I smell it on you. Be honest with me.
Right.
None of that happened in this case. So then they walk back to run, his driver's license and everything. And his partner walks up and he says to his partner on the body-worn camera, I don't smell an odor of alcohol, but I see that he has open twisted teas in the car. So that's why I asked him, where he had been coming from that night. So because he totally lied, the DUI got dismissed and our client was super happy with that outcome.
So there it is. Whether you are facing a charge yourself or you're just simply interested in the subject and you wanted to learn a little bit more, I hope that is in fact what happened. If you learned anything from this, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. But in the end, the point I want to make here is that you can see just how important that somebody who's charged with a crime receives a proper criminal defense. They will be determined guilty or not guilty in court, but the fact that they received that proper defense is what upholds the integrity of the criminal justice system. Thank you for watching.